Hi, my name is Gary Stewart, and I'm the founder and CEO of Founder Tribes, a mobile app that provides founders around the world with access to the feedback, networks, and capital that they need to start up and scale up their businesses, all from their mobile phones. We exist to empower entrepreneurs of all races, genders, geographies, religions, sexual orientations, etc., because we understand that while talent is spread evenly, opportunity is not. And we are here to change that, which is why I am so happy to welcome you to our final event of Women's History Month with five incredible powerhouse women who have joined us to answer the question, why invest in women? This is a question that probably we shouldn't even have to ask, but it is an important question nonetheless, because even though women make up 51% of the US population, female led businesses, and especially businesses run by women of color, don't receive that much in terms of venture capital funding. Women as a group, as a category, only receive about 2 to 3% of venture capital funding, and women themselves only make up about 10% of decision makers at VC funds in the US. So to help us answer this question of, why should we be investing in women, as well as I guess why aren't we investing in more women, this session will be moderated by the amazing Vanetta Young, who is the founder of Vanetta Young Advisors. Vanetta will then introduce you to our four investors from Woke Star Fund, the Artemis Fund, 1863 Ventures, and Health Venture Capital. As usual, I'd also like to thank seven organizations without which this event would not have been possible. These are some of our partners that include OneTech, Microsoft for Startups, Extend Ventures, the Yale Entrepreneurial Society, Loughborough University, Google for Startups, and Oxford Brookes University. And one last thing before passing it over to Vanetta, I'd like to give you all an update. Since launching last month, we already have almost 3,000 users on the app across 3 continents. But we'd love for you to try the app for yourself. All you need to do is to download it from either app store. And to give you a sense as to what the app itself might look like, we decided that we'd love to share with you an inside look into our vision and how exactly the app works.
We live in a world where more than 500 million entrepreneurs will never get access to the feedback, networks, and capital they may need to realize their dreams. Talent is distributed evenly, but opportunity isn't. Founder Tribes exist to change that. Our mobile app can be accessed by anyone, anywhere in the world. It all begins with a founder submitting a pitch that will be evaluated by a community of entrepreneurs and investors relevant to their vertical and stage. Through the app, each founder gets qualified feedback about which areas of their business might need improvement, in the form of how many people swiped right or left, and in the form of ratings on each key element of a business plan based on Sequoia Capital's evaluation system. Each founder is then offered a personalized selection of video tips from world-class founders who explain how they've overcome similar challenges. Our professors are truly world-class and include such names as Stacey Abrams, Steve Blank, Jen Wong, and Anne Wojcicki. If a founder wants more support, she can access our curated database of coaches and mentors and set up one-to-ones, all via the app. Each founder iterates her pitch until the community of entrepreneurs and investors say that she is investment worthy. We'll then introduce her to relevant funders appropriate to her stage and vertical, including venture capital, angels, and alternative finance. We already have paying customers, including Capital Enterprise. And our investors include American unicorn founders such as Sander Daniels, founder of Thumbtack, which has raised $436 million from Sequoia Capital and Google, Zach Bookman, founder of OpenGov, who has raised $140 million from investors including Andreessen Horowitz, executives like Jamie Broderick, who is the former head of wealth management at UBS UK and Jersey, and Dana Wagner, who is currently the chief legal officer at Impossible Foods, which has raised $1.4 billion from investors like Serena Williams, Katy Perry, and Jay-Z. We are leveling the playing field for entrepreneurial talent. So download the app, accelerate your business, and empower yourself.
And now, without much further ado, Vanetta will introduce our amazing trailblazing panel of investors.
Thank you so much, Gary, for having me. Thank you to Founder Tribes for all that you do. It's just absolutely phenomenal. I'm Vanetta Young. I'm an investment readiness advisor. I'm essentially an outsourced chief strategy officer to women and people of color, primarily, who are raising their first private equity and venture capital fund. And I could not be more honored to be here with such a phenomenal slate of panelists. I'd love for them to introduce themselves. I think we'll start with Gayla Jennings O'Byrne.
Hi, everyone. Hello, I'm Gayla Jennings O'Byrne, and I'm the co-founder of the Walkstar Fund. We're an early-stage venture fund that invests in women of color and diverse teams in the technology arena, specifically within media, consumption, things like ed tech, retail tech, marketplace, and then also in the area of sustainability, which for us includes food tech and ag tech and the IoT of things.
Excellent. Next up, we have Melissa Bradley.
Hi, it's a pleasure to be here with so many friends and honored to be part of this discussion. My name is Melissa Bradley, and I am founder and managing partner of 1863 Ventures, as well as general partner of 1863 Venture Fund. We recognize that at present, less than 20% of all Black businesses are tech focused, so we are sector agnostic. Our fund tends to be overweighted, though, in CPG, food and beverage companies. We invest in entrepreneurs who've successfully come through our accelerator program. And then once we've invested in them, we work with them to create outbound-based relationships that will help increase revenue, such as our partnership with Target, Ulta, and others, also in the B2B sector.
Excellent. And for full transparency, I and my spouse, Rustin Brown, are board members of 1863 Venture, so even more honored to have Melissa here today. Next up, we have Leslie Goldman.
Better unmute myself. Hi, I am also honored to be here today, especially with these fellow panelists and our wonderful moderator. I am one of the general partners and co-founders of the Artemis Fund. And the Artemis Fund is also a seed stage fund that backs mission-driven female founders in the United States that are building businesses to increase financial inclusion, address sustainability, and increase opportunities for small business owners. So in a nutshell, we invest in areas, again, that increase financial opportunity, financial inclusion, the care economy, future of work, and climate-friendly consumption. So I'm delighted to be here, and I'll let you take it over.
Excellent. And last but most certainly not least, Donna Leckie.
Good day, everyone. I'm Donna Leckie, co-founder of Health Venture and managing partner of Health Venture Capital. Our firm is a foundry incubator accelerator model focused in the area of early and seed stage digital healthcare companies. We were founded out of Yale University with one of my classmates and my co-founder in 2016. Thank you. Happy to be here.
Excellent. So as you can see, just phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. I have no idea how I'm moderating this conversation because everyone on this screen is famous and I'm absolutely not. So I want to hear, you just introduced yourselves and the work that you're doing now. If each of you could tell us a little bit about how you came into the industry, what was your journey like and how have you gotten to where you are now?
So I'm happy to start. I'll make it quick. My entry into this industry was because I had a bad experience. When I started my first company, which was a financial services company, not fintech, that's how old it is, I went to the SBA to ask for a loan and they told me no. And I said, okay, just help me understand what I need to do differently. And they said they would not invest in me because I was Black. I was a female. They didn't know any Black women successful in financial services. And so once I left that meeting and I got to the bottom of the building, I said, I will be darned if this happens to anybody else who looks like me if I can. I was fortunate enough to have an exit in the company about 2 years later. And so I started angel investing individually, and then tried to partner with some groups, and then ultimately rallied around with 9 other women to create our first venture capital fund, which was called New Capitalists. And we specifically invested in what we call new majority entrepreneurs. And it was just a grinding. I'll be honest, I had no clue what I was doing when I first started. We made a lot of mistakes, but luckily we also made a lot of money, and it was very rewarding. But I think there's an underestimation of the impact that Black GPs have in what they're experiencing. I would say that we talk a lot about the disparity that exists for Black entrepreneurs. I would say it's no different for Black GPs. It was a little bit easier in our first fund because it was all of our own individual money. But now, as we've created the second fund and we're using other people's monies, we're seeing similar struggles as an entrepreneur, that LPs are just not as inclined to invest in Black GPs.
Very interesting. Every time I hear Melissa's story, I'm always like, how could you not have?
Melissa, they flat out said, we're not investing in you because you're Black and you're a woman. They actually
Absolutely.
said, what year was
Absolutely.
this?
This was 1997. Yep. Now, suffice it to say that once I sold the company, they wanted to give me more money. And I said, yeah, I love that you always give me money when I don't need it, which I think is a general trend, right, in the banking world, that we'll give you the money if you actually don't need it. So, yeah.
Very interesting. Leslie, since you've spoken next, can you tell us about your journey into the industry?
Sure. I have always been interested in empowering women, because we're 50% of the population, or 51%, not a special interest group. So I actually got a women's studies master's degree when I was younger, after I graduated. Actually, I'm a Yale as well, Donna. And so I started my career as an opera singer, then a lawyer, and then an investor, then recruiter. So it was a very, it was a straight journey to become a VC, right? I've always
the jungle gym, as Charles Sandberg puts it, the jungle gym rather than the ladder.
Yeah, I like that analogy. Exactly. So through the course of my career, though, I was always interested in investing, and as I said, empowering women and getting involved in causes that would further advance us and give us a voice. So as I was angel investing, and I'm now in 50 companies as an angel investor and 11 other funds in addition to Artemis. So I started doing that before starting Artemis, realizing we just didn't see a whole lot of, there were never any other female angel investors in the rooms I was in. And then when we had demo days or pitch competitions, you maybe would see one female founder, but mostly all male teams, all male boards, all male problems. And so so I set out with my 2 partners to try and change the numbers, like all of the women on this call, and realized that my little check sizes weren't enough. So we decided to start the fund, and we invest exclusively in female founders now. And I'm not looking back. I'm happier than I've ever been in my career. Just wish I did it 25 years ago. Although maybe then there wouldn't have been an appetite for it, right? It would have been hard. Yeah.
Right. No, so true. One Yaley to the next. How about Donna?
All right.
Into the industry.
And an opera enthusiast, I won't say that I'm an opera singer, but I'm an opera enthusiast, with Leontine Price being one of my favorite opera singers, and Marian Anderson, of course. And so happy to be here, plus fellow lawyer. So got a lot in common. Wanted to just share, and unfortunately I have 2 computers, so I may have some technical difficulties, but women are always prepared. So if you see me shuffling around, it's because something went out and something's coming up. So anyway, my journey into the industry was fairly unique from the perspective that no one ever told me that this really was an area of focus. I never really understood venture capital as being, I've heard of it, but when you're in school, particularly back in, the yesteryears, and I'll just leave it at that, it was, you just went through your accounting program, your finance program, and that was the extent of it. And no one really taught you that, hey, here is a whole nother area of the world that's interesting, and you should consider that. And so I actually went back to school back in my 50s and decided to do, this is my fourth degree, decided to go back to do my MBA at Yale SOM. And my business partner and co-founder said, hey, you know what, you do all things, finance, treasury, law, et cetera. I do all things technology. And we both are very, very interested in digital healthcare. Let's start a firm. And initially I was like, he's the patent holder, one of the patent holders on Zelle. I had a thriving career as well. It's like, why even, rock the boat? Especially, again, like as I mentioned, being later in life, you're trying to get toward the retirement piece of this thing. And I have a lovely son who's 23 years old on March 25th. And, you're thinking through all those types of things. And so, I said, if there's a time for me to cut vinyl, now's the time. Now's the time, because I've been basically doing M&A work, tax restructuring, planning, treasury, and the rest of it. Dealt with buying and selling companies all day long, dealt with due diligence for companies all day long, dealt with the whole notion of convertible notes. And then a lot of times when you think about the businesses, particularly in the VC world and the M&A world, tax can be the gaping issue. And so I took all of that experience and decided that this is what I like to do. I'd like to try it and see if I like it. And I really enjoy it. I enjoy it because it's almost like when I was an adjunct professor before I went to my real job, and I was in public accounting for nearly 20 years. And I was at Ernst & Young at the time, and I taught at Clark Atlanta University, Principles 1 of Accounting. I taught a little bit differently in that I taught from the perspective of you setting up your own business. So it's fortuitous because I didn't even know what I was doing. I just had them set up their own business and put them in teams to do that. And then when they were done with all of that, they were able to actually apply for SBA loans. So my trajectory was interesting because I kind of morphed into this world. And then when my business partner just had a compelling discussion for me as to why we should go into business together, and we've not looked back since.
Awesome. I can go next and last, I guess. So my journey really starts with my mother. I'm second generation Black woman, tech and business, and I grew up in Silicon Valley. And unfortunately, the landscape that I saw then hasn't changed that much now through these 50-year plus eyes of mine. But I grew up with a lot of women around me in tech and science, and knew that that was the world that I wanted to see. And so my journey also included Silicon Valley early in my career, and then Wall Street. And then after a bout of cancer, which I survived, and went from being afraid of dying and got excited to live, thank you, I decided to take everything that I had, from my contacts to my savings account, which pays my staff and our operations, to my knowledge, and put that all towards three things: championing, storytelling, and investing in women of color. And I haven't looked back, and I don't need I do need a job, but I don't need a job. This is the job for me. And so that's what I get up to do each day.
That is phenomenal. Just every last one of your stories, from, the most typical of which is like, oh no, I'm a Black woman who grew up in this industry. And there is no part of any of your stories that it screams, there is a should, that there is a way for people to get in, especially women, to get into this industry. And I absolutely adore that. So kind of just jumping straight in and getting down to brass tacks. We all know the stats. We know what the problem is in terms of women getting access to capital. I think for me, access to capital is a civil rights issue, and that's why I care about it so deeply. So what does equal access to capital look like to you? And I think another way of saying this is, what should our goal be as an industry as it pertains to investing in women? We've acknowledged the problem, But where are we going? Where should we be headed? And this is open to anyone.
Yeah, I can start with that. I've been on a couple sides of this, right? Being in technology, being an investment banker, mergers and acquisitions, like Donna spoke of, and then being on the philanthropic side of it. So I've seen capital being deployed in a couple different ways into the market. But at the end of the day, I think we have to stay focused on producing and helping build companies to success. Melissa is very humble in talking about her exit, but that is huge. And in some ways, I don't know that the market and the capital is racist. I think there's segments of it that are, but on the whole, I don't think the capital markets or capital itself is racist. If anything, I think capital is lazy. I think it's lazy. I think it likes winners. And so I think our job is to build out our portfolio companies to success so that there are winners. And then the conversation isn't about, is this impact? Is this venture philanthropy? Whatever title people give me, instead of just wanting to call me an investor, when they see those numbers, when they see those IRRs, then that's when we start to change. Then capital will equalize, in my opinion.
You know, in 2018, the U.S. venture capital industry essentially had about $400 billion in assets under management. However, women-founded firms received only 1.9% in VC investment. And so when you think about female-led startups, and typically we make 78 cents on the dollar in comparison to our male counterparts who make 31 cents on the dollar. Yet 65% of the firms still had no female partners, and improvement from 85% at the end of 2018. So VC firms are at risk, and the industry is at risk for losing out on nearly $4 trillion in investing by not investing in women. And so we really have to step back and ask ourselves a question, as you did, Vanetta, that, what does equal access to capital really mean? The statistics are staggering. And whether or not it's racism, white supremacy, whatever it is, we just know that whatever it is needs to be changed. And that's why these types of conversations are very important, because I think that what people don't understand are some of those numbers, and what they really, and it's illuminating when you hear such staggering statistics, yet at the same time, and I think Leslie mentioned that, we're talking about 51% of being in coming out of colleges and the rest of it. We really need to just step back and reassess and rework the model, because the model's not working. And so it's important to understand what these numbers represent, that right now there isn't equal access to capital, and what is the solutioning around ensuring that we create the right opportunities, which I know we'll be discussing that a little bit later on in the broadcast.
Yeah, I think that all of us here are consciously, we're intentional, right? We're educating. And these stats are indisputable. Anyway, I mean, I in putting those stats out there, you've got to believe that there's a certain percentage of people that still don't believe them, even after all of the research, right? Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, I know I saw the statistic about gender equity, 200 years to get to gender equity in all these various areas. But I think as it has already been said, that when we do have more successful female founders and women of color who have, become billion-dollar companies and are the focus of the media, perhaps we'll see some more integration of networks. Perhaps we'll be able to break down unconscious bias, which I think is one of the biggest problems, the network effect and the unconscious bias, right, combined. I one day I don't think I'll see it in my lifetime, would like to see a world where we don't need to have just a female-focused fund, a minority-focused fund, and then the other bro funds. It'd be nice if everybody were focused and their lens was completely open, but I don't know when that will happen.
I'm okay with it. I'm enjoying the sisterhood. I could stay, stay in the space.
But just to get more funding out there to women, I think,
Yeah.
have men join the party, right?
Yeah. You know,
And
the
only thing I
other
want
thing
to add to what you said was I do think that there is unconscious bias, but I also think that there is conscious bias. When you look at the number of people who are in VC, they're predominantly white male, and they come from the Harvards and the Stanfords and the NYUs and the Yales and the rest of it. And so part of that is a conditioning in some respects of the minds of people who are particularly of the traditional investment firms. And that's the mindset that absolutely has to get changed, because I don't want to carry the weight of the VC world, asset management world, founder world on my shoulders as a woman and as a Black woman, right? Because if my fellow white male counterparts can fail and they just failed, and so let's just invest in the next one, it looks just like them, that's not where we want to be. We have to be very intentional. I think that's what the word that was used. We have to be very intentional about what we do and the strategies that we put forth to ensure that we create equal access to capital.
Yeah,
on that point. Oh, go ahead.
go ahead. No,
I would say on that point, I think it's, what I'm hearing and what I'm experiencing in the work is not all founders are the same. And we have got to break the stereotype that everybody looks the same when they show up in Silicon Valley or Silicon Alley. I think the second thing, and so therefore there is a need to expand the archetype of what makes a good entrepreneur. I think underlying my experience with the SBA is that I didn't look like everybody else who came before them, and they could not fathom that I had that capacity. And part of that is due to the national narrative about Black people in general, and certainly around the narrative around women. So I think, one, we have got to have a better glide path because, VC is not your first stop. Let's be clear. When you think about the wealth gap and the lack of wealth and the Black tax, there's no friends and family around. And my friends and family gave me $2,000 and then said, but I need that back in 2 weeks so I can pay my rent. We don't have that kind of access, right? Then when we go to banks, we know that legally we are charged anywhere between 2 to 5% higher on a bank loan, and oftentimes don't go because of fear of being denied. So I think it's not just looking and examining and reimagining venture capital, it's reimagining that entire glide path that gets us to a point where we actually have a viable product to then go pitch somebody in venture capital. Then I think it's the narrative change of having more data. One quick thing. I am deeply disturbed by the fact that people keep saying more than 40% of Black businesses have closed because of COVID. Well, when we ran our numbers at 1863, we lost 7.5%. Now, what we did experience, though, was some ebbs and flows of businesses opening and closing, but that was because of lack of cash flow smoothing, which, let's be clear, happened way before PPP and way before COVID. So I think we have to understand also that the narrative around what makes a successful Black business or a female business is completely skewed. There's not a lot of data. I think there's been more, thank goodness, around women, but certainly not the nuance around race and women. Black women, as Malcolm X said, are the most disrespected and underestimated. There's not a lot of data out there. And so I'm deeply disappointed in research organizations because they're not willing to help change that narrative. I think all of us could tap on, everybody's doing Silicon Valley, but my fear is that we would still be viewed as the exception and not the norm. And we need a much larger data set to Gail and Donna's point, actually and Leslie's point of why and where there is success. We already know, right? Data says that women are the best investors. We also have data that says women are the best at conserving capital and creating outsized returns. And that's even at a board role, not even at a CEO role. So I do think there's this issue around how are we sharing information that points to our value and our consistency in generating returns and not all the other stuff that they see on TV.
Yeah,
Right.
I love that you said that, because the numbers that talk about how little VC dollars are flowing to women is actually not data that I focus on, because trying to get someone to feel that that's their problem and that therefore they should change their behavior to fix that problem is just not something I want to put energy towards. Rather, I like where you went, which is like the data that shows the value, how we are stimulating the economy, how we are adding jobs, how we are putting innovation into the marketplace. Like that's the data and that's the narrative that I want us to be putting forward. So I love that you raised that, Melissa.
Exactly. I mean, and one lesson that I have learned in the past couple of years is to focus on what you want, not on what you don't. And it is amazing in saying, okay, we've established that this is not what we want. This is going to be our goal. and be it something as esoteric as, all right, women are getting 50% of the capital. We need to set a deadline, and that's what we're running toward. Just having that sense of where are we going, because we know what we don't want. And one thing that you've all touched on that I would that Melissa spoke about, but I'd like to hear more voices around this are, so what are some of the assumptions that need to change to make more progress in investing in women? So obviously we want to see this narrative be different, but what are some of those underlying assumptions that need to change?
Yeah, so this is Gayla. So one of the things that I start conversations with is pull out your phone. Everybody's got a phone in their back pocket, handbag, wherever it is. And I say to the potential investor, that technology includes technology by a Black woman. And I emphasize Black woman. Right? Not a woman of color, not a woman, a Black woman. Caller ID, call waiting, and the fiber optic cables within that. The fiber optic cables that are even letting this happen. That is our legacy. And so for me, that's the assumptions, that's the start, how we start to change that narrative. Now, I don't own that knowledge myself. I wish all of us would start conversations with that, right? So I'm going to repeat it. Caller ID, call waiting, fiber optic cables, and CCTV. I just added another one to it. CCTV, security cameras. Innovations by a Black woman. Not the same Black woman, different Black woman. But those are that's the kind of knowledge. That is our legacy. That is our history. So when you talk about assumptions, we need to start with what our legacy and history are.
And I'm so glad you said that, Gayla, because a lot of it has to do with the ignorance that people have and the lack of education around who's actually contributed to what in terms of society, in terms of innovation.
Right.
And I think that we have to have a re-education. Carter G. Woodson came up with a book called The Miseducation of the Negro. And I think that there's a miseducation of folks that are in who really don't understand and really get in a meaningful way the level of contributions that not only women have made to society, that Blacks have made to society, but just in general, just really understanding what that means. And I think, unfortunately, when you talk about women and women of color, that we are substantially undercapitalized, but over mentored. I mean, we need mentorship all day long, but I need them. Show me the money. Was that movie? Show me the money. Help me to really build my business.
Gary Maguire.
My business. Thank you, Gary Maguire. Gary Maguire. Show me the money. On average, women of color funds receive 10x less than men of color. I mean, that's a staggering stat as well. And we talked a little bit about it earlier about the pattern recognition of all the schools that certain people come from that basically are in this industry. People feel comfortable with people that they're used to working with or that they're used to seeing. So if I have a fund manager, for example, who happens to be a woman who's interested in bringing to a traditional firm a particular innovation, if it doesn't look and smell like what they're used to seeing, it's a challenge for her to even come up to her principals and her partners and the folks that she reports to have this conversation, because it looks so different. And so consequently, they don't look at her like she's wacky. But at the same time, it's like, okay, if I don't see that there's this unicorn value in this, I am not going to move forward. We're not going to move forward as a firm. And then now I run the risk of being evaluated that maybe I'm not making the best selections in terms of what opportunities are relative to innovation for the firm that I work for, that I'm managing assets for. And so, when we think about it, sort of by way of definition, institutional professionals are professionals who are there, who manage a large pool of capital. But they also are there and responsible for evaluating risk. Right. And women are considered to be risky investments. And women of color, Black women, brown women, are considered to be risks. And so what does any responsible fiduciary do? A responsible fiduciary is there to manage their risk. So they're comfortable with rinse and repeat. And that's part of the challenge. And so what we have to do is really think about how that changes, or that narrative needs to change. Because if we don't, and we already know the value that, I mean, the studies are there. Someone said it. The studies are there. The studies are there to show that if you have a diverse board, if you have diversity around innovation and entrepreneurship and investors and businesses, it's like, I think it's 30. You do 35% better than if you don't.
30%.
Well, whatever the number is, 30 to 35%. So the point of it is that if that's the case, then we're all smart people here, and the investors are presumably smart, and people who run investment firms are presumably smart. Then why is it that is, to me, that's the linchpin of really trying to understand what this is about. Right. Because we just can't say if the data is there, we just can't say, oh, we'll show up and eventually the data will work in our favor. No, the data is clear.
Yes, but here's what's interesting. So you said 35, I said 30, you said whatever, but you had a very clear number of how much money we're not getting, what that percentage was. You cited the source of it, right? Like, we ourselves have to change the narrative. We need to know the data, the right percentage. We need to know the right source, right? And we need to lead with that story. Like, I don't even, the number you gave of how much we don't have, I haven't used that number since 2016. I haven't used any of those. Any deficit-based number is not in my vocabulary.
Yeah. Okay.
Like that's us needing to
right. And that's your choice. But I think that at the end of the day, the point is that, because I don't want to get caught up into that. I think at the end of the day, the bottom line is that there's opportunity that's here for us to change the narrative. And I think that's really the question that we're dealing with, is changing the narrative.
Right. And so I think that leads me to my next question. And Leslie, I'd love to get your thoughts on this first. Is, given that there are these assumptions, my favorite, former LP, I was at a private equity fund of funds and also the SBIC program at the SBA. So I am intimately familiar with the way that, LPs, the institutional investors, think about the concept of risk. And now being a bit removed from it, I'm like, is this the perception of risk, or is this actual risk? So the question that I have for you, starting with Leslie, is, how are you encouraging your peers to invest more actively in women, be that other GPs, be it LPs? How are you encouraging or putting pressure, all in the however you would like to phrase it? What are you doing to move the needle, not just with your own capital, but with others as well?
Yeah. So I am out there as the rest of this panel is out there proselytizing, and showing people the numbers with decks and data, but also, there's research that shows that emerging managers are outperforming, right? And most emerging managers are us, the women of color, minorities. And so that's getting out there as well for institutional investors to take a look at. Of course, that's maybe not going to move them to get out of their comfort zone, as we talked about. But it's interesting that we talk about risk, because by the time a female founder comes to us looking for money, they're already proven. They already have to be 300% better than their male counterparts, right? And then women of color have to be even better, right, to get funding. It just seems, and we know that women are judged on performance rather than potential, and men are judged on potential. And we've seen the research from Dana Konzai and Columbia, et cetera, about the questions that are asked of women versus men from VCs. But that, in my mind, is a huge de-risking factor, that by the time they come to us, they have revenue, they have a product in market, and they're half the valuation of their male counterparts. And we know that they do twice the amount of revenue for every dollar invested, as I think Donna gave the statistic of the 78 cents. So what am I missing? It doesn't seem like a risk to me. It seems like our portfolio, which is going to be all women, I can't imagine any of them failing. Now, maybe there'll be singles, doubles, triples in there. But because of all of these factors, I feel like it's completely de-risked. So anyway, my goal is just to have more people understand that. And we need more women investing too, who to get off the sidelines and start looking at this asset class. So we do a lot of education there too.
Melissa, do you have thoughts on this? I would love to know given that, you touch various aspects of the industry, what are some of the ways that you are sort of not just getting the word out, but kind of, egging people on? What's the nudge that GPs need, or frankly, LPs, and you all have those too? Like, what's the nudge that they need?
Nudge. I think it's probably a slap across the face and a concrete block on the head. I would say we're doing two things. We're looking at it from a supply problem, that LPs are not willing to come up with the cash. And we're looking at it as how do we make our entrepreneurs more attractive, which is unfortunate, but we're trying to do what we can. I think on the LP side, I think like Gayla, we have found ourselves in these wacky conversations like, is it impact? Is helping Black people impact? Is that enough impact? Are they environmental? And I just hang up on those calls. Luckily, I have a partner GP, and so he's the good cop and I'm the bad cop. So I think one is I have minimized my expectations of LPs. Two, I look at every LP meeting as an opportunity to educate, probably not to get investment dollars. And three, we're just brutally honest and try to expedite the process. And so if we have more than 3 meetings, I say to them, I assume you're not going to invest in me. Thank you for the time. Check your diversity box and move on. And I think, like Donna, who looks absolutely amazing, I think age attributes to that. I don't have time to waste. I'm not here to convince you. I'm here to just take your money and reinvest it, and more importantly, help you make money. So I think on the LP side, I am willing to have one educational call, and then that's it. It is not my job as a Black woman to educate you about race. But we do have tons of resources. We've actually created a guide that we released in December for how venture capitalists or how investors can invest in the Black community. We did a series of focus groups and surveys with our Black founders and others in our network, and put together a guide that's pretty simple and it's available to anybody. So we have that first educational call. We send them the guide. If they call us back again, we go, okay, let's talk about fund dynamics and economics. And the other thing I would say is that now that we have a few lead investors, I have them call. They're not Black. They have invested in other Black funds, and they can say what I can't say. Well, they'll say things that I probably can say but shouldn't say. And so I think also having LPs that are currently in the fund also be advocates is extremely important. So we tell anybody who makes an investment as, we don't just want your money. We need you to be out there proselytizing, not just about our fund, but about the value of investing in Black GPs who then invest in women and or people of color. On the entrepreneur side, though, we're not naive. Again, because most of our companies are not tech companies, they're CPG, food and beverage. We do spend a lot of time, again, about thinking about how do we make them more attractive. So we don't spend a lot of time on pitching. We spend an inordinate amount of time of understanding operations and taking you from a startup founder to a CEO. Because I do think, with all due respect, there's a lot of folks that don't think they can be a CEO. I think they're an amazing founder, but they're not a CEO. And so we spend a lot of time de-risking these entrepreneurs and having them have systems, and do they, have OKRs and KPIs, and not just here's what I'm doing and here's my lovely app and give me this much money and I promise you, but are you demonstrating that you can actually meet the underlying expectations on how to use that money? Money is a means to an end, and if you show up and you can't do that. So in our programs, we are being mindful of de-risking, and then we're setting up relationships. So we have lots of relationships for supplier diversity, for B2B, for B2C, for CPG. I alluded to a few of them earlier, and we spend a lot of time with those partners because I can't invest in them if they don't have revenue. And so we spend a lot of time trying to bridge that gap between the entrepreneur and potential clients. We don't handhold them, but we'll say, look, we'll make some connections. We talk in and check in, particularly with Target, and say, like, what do you need? What are you looking for this month? Do we have them? What are your minimum, what are your minimum requirements? Are you negotiable on the split? What is the marketing support? And they've been open as well as lots of other companies. So we also do try to play an advocacy role in a way, small a, for our entrepreneurs with some of these larger customers that we know they need. And we try to leapfrog to get them there, because the hope is that if we de-risk them and they're coming with revenue, can you still really say no? And then if you do still really say no, then I now have the right to call racism what it is.
Yeah. And, it's interesting because part of, in terms of coordinating with peers and also, what it is that we're doing as a firm, it's interesting because we started off with making a determination that we were going to raise a $100 million fund. And so throughout the last several years, recognized that entrepreneurship education was so critically important, that especially when you talk about women and you talk about underrepresented and underserved communities who are entrepreneurs, it just really got to the point where we recognize that there's a lot of work that needs to be done. So Health Haven Hub, which is one of the other legal entities that we that falls under the Health Venture umbrella, we started to do entrepreneurship education for 6 of the academic institutions in the New Haven area. There's a program called iHaven, which is representative of 5 of the institutions outside of Yale. And then there's Helix, where we specifically focus on working with students and make sure that they understand when you think about being an investor or a founder, an entrepreneur, what does entrepreneurship education look like? So we actually created a curriculum from all the way to your pitch to how to sew up on a term sheet and everything in between. Having the conversation with an investor. What legal structure should you be in? Do you have the right leadership? Because you can find yourself in a situation where you think, and I think Melissa, you mentioned, you think you may be the CEO, but guess what? At the end of the day, you might be the clinician, but you're not the CEO. You don't know how to run a business, and really creating the education around that. But I think we have to lead by example. So one of the other things that we've done through Health Haven Hub is we created the Leader Summit, which we just held last month on February 19th and 20th, where we basically set up women who, and this is our third, our first was in Atlanta, Georgia, via Georgia Tech, and KPMG supported us in the process. Our second one was in Bangalore, India at IIMB, and our third one was virtual. And what we do is we create opportunities, 2 days of women of entrepreneurship education, innovation and technology education, day 1. Day 2 is focused on matching entrepreneurs with specific investors. So we have basically an investor day where they actually do speed vesting. And so it allows them to really be in front of companies. And the reason why I decided to create that was because when I spent a lot of time in China and India and Dubai pre-COVID, one of the reasons why I created this was because what I saw was, particularly when I was in China, that there were 20 teams that we hosted and were judging at the Yale Center, Beijing. And what happens is you see literally 19 teams where men were all front facing. But then when there was a technical question, they had to turn to their female counterpart to say, what was that? How do we address this? And I said, you know what? We're going to come up with leaders. And leaders is LEAD, capital HERS, right? Very deliberate in terms of how we focus on that. In addition, my final comment on this is that we then created, and then I'll give you a stat around the focus for speed vesting were for women who were raising anywhere between $250,000 and $3 million. So no small feat. Then I recently founded an organization with 4 other women called the Women of Capital Color Collective. And our focus is not on founders per se, it's on asset managers. Women who are we are not running the show. We are not running the money. And we've got to get more asset managers in. The founders, I believe, will come. We can support them all day long, but we need asset managers as well. And I think that those are some of the things when you talk about putting pressure on peers, and when you talk about what are we doing in the community to get the industry to understand things differently, those are the types of things that Health Venture is doing to support that process.
Excellent. I mean, once again, incredibly impressed with not just the work that you're doing in your respective funds, but the splash that you're making in the larger industry to move this needle. I think we have time for one more question, which in the vein of focusing on what you want and not on what you don't, what has been your favorite female founder success story? I would love for each of you to answer this if you have an answer to it. What has been your favorite? I know you have more than one. So what has been your favorite female founder success story?
I'll go. So I found that I find that question to be a tough one, because to your point, there are so many that I just view that have just been I'm just seeing amazing trajectories, and but there's one.
I totally know I'm asking you to choose between your children. Like I very well aware of that. That was intentional.
I only have one, and I call him the number one son, and he says to me, "Mom, I'm your only son." I'm like, "But you're still my number one son." But one of the things that one of the investors that I find, rather founders that I find is very, very impressed with the development. Sarah Reed with Mind's Eye Health Solution. She is an amazing professional who focuses on PTSD, particularly in the Black and Brown communities, and recognizing that the treatment that's necessary and required, we have to think outside the box, because we're traumatized, all day. I mean, we all know that the George Floyd trial is happening right now. And so as a consequence, you think about PTSD in that regard, in terms of certain communities are higher. I mean, I think within the Black community, it's 7%. In terms of folks that have PTSD. With women, it's like 8.4%. It's a huge percentage in comparison. And so the point of it is that what she has done is create a company, again, Mind's Eye Health Solutions, that also is focused on not only PTSD, but what can we do to really create community work and group work to support each other. And so I've seen her go from, I've got this idea to, I just decided to transition out of the position I was in, working for somebody else, and I'm really going to go after this. I'm going for this. And I see her walking in her power, and I'm so proud of her, because it's been 2 years that I've just been on the sidelines, helping and supporting and being there to answer questions, but just to see that growth and that development from a person who was like, I'm not really sure I want to do this, to like, I'm going for it. I've got these ideas. I'm looking at working with these individuals. I know what my network is, and she's walking in her power. And I really am proud of her in that regard.
Excellent. I know we're very, very, very short on time, and we need to bring Wendy back, but I would love to hear at least one more super quick, because that was fantastic.
Go ahead, Gail.
Hey there, it's Kayla. I'm going to pick a woman in our portfolio right now who is thinking differently about the cost of goods needed for her company. And we were able to connect her with one of our venture scouts who's based in India. And I love that she immediately was able to hop on the phone and talk through and maybe able to get part of her supplies for her company from India. Now we're thinking through from a transportation point of view, what impact that will have on the environment, right? And is that extractive, or can that be done with less emissions? But I love that there's just this global thinking that women have as entrepreneurs, and she's an example of that. And I think the more we lean into this borderless global marketplace, I think we're just going to have even that much more success. So I shared that as an example of a story that I'm loving right now, because I want that message to get out for more women to think across borders and across markets.
Exactly. I love it. Thank you all so much again for being here, for being the role models that you are, for showing us that there is so much possibility, and that there are so many stories for us to focus on what we want, and changing the narrative that's currently not serving us, but developing one that absolutely will. But I want to invite Wendy back. Thank you all so much again.
Hi, everyone. I'm Wendy Maldonado D'Amico here at Founder Tribes. And on behalf of Founder Tribes, I wanted to thank all of you, Vanetta, Gayla, Leslie, Melissa, Donna, for joining us here today for this incredible conversation. I'm such fans of all of you. You're doing incredible work to change the paradigm of how people are thinking about investing in women and women of color and communities of color. And this conversation, I hope, is just the beginning of more conversations you will have with each other as you go forward to change this landscape for all of us. Thank you to our audience for tuning in. Thank you to Supreme Factory for co-sponsoring today's event. And I'd like to invite all of you who are members of Clubhouse to hop over to Clubhouse to join us for a discussion. Our producer will flash the link on the bottom of the screen in just a moment so that you can go over there. It's also posted on our social media channels. You could just click through for that Clubhouse discussion if you'd like to continue the conversation about this incredible topic. So this was our last event for Women's History Month. I would just encourage everybody who's watching to tune in for our Tribal Pitches event, which will be a monthly event going forward. So if you have an amazing venture you'd like to pitch on our app, you can do so. And if you make the cut, you will be able to pitch to top investors once a month on our channel. So thanks again to everybody for joining, and most of all, thanks to our amazing panelists and to Vanetta for moderating. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. This is
Okay.
amazing.
Take care.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.